how do you see digital experience influences the customer experience and how employees training makes sense of it?
Our guest today is Greg Melia, CEO of the Customer Experience Professionals Association, the global governing body establishing the benchmarks for the entire CX industry. With over 2 decades of structural leadership, including executive roles at the US Chamber of Commerce, Greg has transitioned CX from ambiguous marketing sentiment into a rigorous cross-functional business discipline. In this episode, we unpack why relying on manual heroic CX is the unscalable operational trap that limits enterprise growth. We also break down how to transition from legacy lagging sentiment surveys to real-time operational data pipelines that drive true digital maturity and transformation sovereignty. Let's welcome Greg Melia.
Greg, you have argued that CX must be performance led business strategy. It should be blended into the corporate strategy. But boardroom sees CX as a cost center, as a customer delight element in their execution and operations. How do we shift board's mindset from customer delight to CX that works directly in revenue growth, retention, and scale?
Nav, first of all, thank you for letting me be here and have this conversation with you. And I love that first question because this is a problem I think we've actually created for ourselves. We were the people who came into the boardrooms and told people that they should focus on how likely is somebody to recommend or customer delight or customer satisfaction. What we may have overlooked is that the conversation that was already happening in the boardroom was about customer growth. It was about business growth. And I think what we need to do now is make sure that we're refocusing and relearning the language of the boardroom so that when we don't come trying to change the conversation to CX, but instead we come to talk about how CX drives growth through retention, through loyalty, through digital improvements. All of those things lead to growth, and growth is what CEOs and shareholders care about.
Who needs to understand the language of boardroom? You say like it's CEO, CMO, CRO. Like who is responsible to speak that language in the boardroom?
Yeah. You just named every single one that you just named is responsible for speaking that language in the boardroom. So we shouldn't have a finance conversation and a marketing conversation and a CX conversation in the boardroom. We should have executive growth conversations in the boardroom. We should have strategy conversations in the boardroom. And we need to make sure that when the CX professional is speaking, they're thinking through the lens of sales, marketing, product, employee, shareholder, and customer, not just speaking with the voice of the customer. We don't want the boardroom to be a place of debate. We want the boardroom to be a place of consensus building where all of the executive leaders bring the different perspectives together and make the stronger choices. And those stronger choices are not just a question of what is right. It's also a question of what is right now. How do we set our priorities for the change that we can drive in the next quarter, the next year, instead of long-term aspirational goals that we will continue to build capacity for, but the timing may not be right for them to be a priority today.
Yeah, typically, um, we don't have like an individual leader in the boardroom just to represent the customer part of it, customer part of the business. We have sales officer, we have marketing officer, revenue officer. Directly or indirectly, everyone's work influences customer experience. But if you want to pick, what is that one title in the boardroom who owns CX?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I had my druthers, every organization would have a customer experience officer or a chief customer officer. Interestingly enough, just before I joined this call today, I was looking at a LinkedIn post from Michael Hinshaw, and Michael, is a great CX leader. Pointed out that Apple doesn't have a customer experience leader. Yet Apple has a great customer experience program because they've infused CX thinking through all of the different elements and all of the different disciplines. I think we've argued far too long on whether CX should be located, and I've heard it located in operations, I've heard it located in marketing, I've heard it located in
Right.
sales.
That's where the confusion arises.
Yeah, and I think that what we need to do is we need to build that capacity so that every one of those roles understands that customer experience is a part of their thinking and part of their toolkit, but I do think that a customer experience is important enough that there should be a dedicated leader. If I had to put it together with something, I would probably lean towards marketing. And the reason I say that is that when it comes to marketing and sales, those are the two places where you're first building your relationship with the customer. And if we're going to get into the element with somebody else, I'd like to get in with the people who are connecting early, making the promises so that we can make sure that the rest of the organization delivers on them. But the research does not show that there is a perfect place to place customer experience in an organization. The key is to make sure that customer experience is blended into the strategy of each of those areas that you mentioned.
Yes, exactly. It should be part of strategy and the culture in the organization. That's what I believe as well. But just having it there is a good thing to, and it's a good start. But operationalizing it into the DNA of companies, day-to-day activities, every individual's mindset towards delivering that customer experience. And it also implies down to employee experience. For example, like if employees are frustrated, it's gonna get delivered to customer in a way or the other to serve, right? How to operationalize it, how much role data plays into that, what are those other activities that companies can incorporate in the day-to-day practice to have that good customer experience in place.
Yeah, and I think that's a great spot and a great question because we have two different things that we need to do when we are driving CX across the organization. One side is working with the management discipline. It's understanding those leaders and helping them see that customer experience helps them achieve their sales goals, helps them achieve their product development goals, helps them achieve their operational goals. And that is a management element. The second element is helping individuals understand where their frontline service fits in. How do they operationalize their tasks? How do they have their voice be heard? How do they bring their perspective in and help the management team achieve its goals in its space? So, one of the things that's really interesting is that I think we do need to recognize that CX is everybody's role because everybody has to have a role in the delivery of that customer experience. If that breaks down, the whole system falls apart. But there are certain people, the people who are in management and leadership, that have a greater responsibility to understand how to craft the strategy and make those choices. One of the tricky things about customer experience is that customer experience isn't necessarily about creating a specific feeling. It is about creating a feeling that aligns the customer's perception with the brand strategy. So when that's a luxury brand, that's luxury choices that are being made. When that's a value conscious efficiency brand, those are efficiency decisions that are being made. And so the management team has to make those choices and then convey to the frontline employees so that when you are at a fine dining restaurant, you are not being given an efficiency treatment. And when you're at a fast food restaurant, you're not being given the high touch luxury space because that's not what your expectation was for that customer experience strategy.
Yeah, restaurant is a great place for a customer experience exposure. If anyone wants to learn, like, okay, uh, how good or bad customer experience feels like, is restaurant is a good place to start. Good place to see an example. Like, we very well know food choices are very personal and very close to us and spiritual as well, right? Like all senses gets activated, and yeah, if it gets messed up, I mean, that tells a lot, like how customers would feel like if anything goes wrong, to making them happy in terms of service model or even like product they're using, phone, everything. Yes, typically it's also seen as like if staff is not equipped enough, and these days everything is digital. I mean, you you pick a process, random process from millions of processes in the organization, it has a digital connection to it. It is run by some machine, it is used by a person on machine, on computers. So data gets a leverage here. Data is very important for people to have the latest information and the most easy to consume format. So it's efficient, it's fast. How do you see digital experience influences the customer experience, and how employees training makes sense of it?
Yeah, the first thing that I want to acknowledge is I love the way that you teed that up, but I wanna take it one step further, and I want to go back to our restaurant analogy. One of
Yeah.
my guilty pleasures is watching a TV series called, Bar Rescue, and it's set in the hospitality setting and, how do you create the right environment for a bar to be successful or not, and mostly they're going into turnaround, bars that are failing. What you will notice in every single one of their episodes is that they use digital technology in order to analyze the problem and in order to fix the problem. So while in the end, the experience is the drink or the food and beverage that the individual has in the environment that it's served, it's still powered by that digital area, whether that's getting the orders back to the kitchen, figuring out inventory, etc., or it is on the other side of looking at the menu design and figuring out where your eye tracks to. So
Right.
digital is an empowering tool to create better in-person experiences. And so anyone who's listening to this and who says, "Oh, well, I'm just involved in a restaurant. Digital's not relevant to me. That's Amazon.com or that's a website." No, digital is relevant to all of you. You need to understand where your digital readiness is and how you can use that to move forward. But on the broader side, I think that we need to recognize that in today's economy, uh, that is not very far from anyone's uh,
Yeah.
person and being, and that where people turn to get information, to fit tasks into their busy life, to move forward, is really in that mobile space in that area. And what they're looking for is no longer using the phone or the digital platform to find information. They're looking for digital systems to help them do their interactions with an organization. That comes from beginning to explore and find the right product, to making the purchase, to finding instructions on how to use a product, and to follow up in case there is any difficulty, to come back into the customer service element in the area. Heck, you even have loyalty programs that are administered through the phone, and they're getting very sophisticated, where they're using the phone to follow up and to make recommendations to you, not just based on your response, but based on the data that can be collected from the ecosystem. In order to say, we noticed that you've been ordering this on a frequent basis. Would you want to sign up for a subscription? Or since you've been buying this product, we have this new product that we think you might be interested in. All of that is done through a highly connected digital system.
You're spot on like how to personalize digital experience, and that's where I'm coming to as well now. Personalization is all about the right information to the right people at the right time. Okay. So if these three dots are must connected in order to deliver good digital customer experience. But if anything goes wrong here, it negatively influence the experience, hence the revenue stream for the business. But many businesses think like their customer experience is personalized because they have segments in place, they have CRM in place, and they have uh, digital experience and personalization program in place. As we mentioned, like having a, a revenue performance led customer experience strategy in the corporate strategy is a good start. Similarly, having all these programs and tools in place is a good start. But where do companies failing to deliver that personalized experience. From your experience as a CEO of CXPA, you define North Star for customer experience in the industry. Where do you see businesses are failing to deliver that personalized experience?
Yeah, you are right, Nav. One of the things that companies have to be thinking about is this personalization issue and where these challenges are breaking down. Where is personalization working and where is personalization failing when it comes to the digital ecosystem? Since you asked, let's go into the failing, first.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the challenges that organizations are having is that they think that personalization is simply using the information they have about the person to put their name on something, even though they don't tailor the rest of the experience to them. So you've seen pictures probably of grocery stores that have put up signs for different holidays and putting discounted prices on foods that people who celebrate that holiday would not eat. That
Mhm.
is the visual representation of somebody sending a personalized or allegedly personalized offer to an individual for a program, product, or service that doesn't make sense. A few years ago, I got a call from a department store that wanted to know if I wanted to extend the warranty on my refrigerator. And my daughter was listening to the call and heard me say to them, I said, "You mean the refrigerator that is broken and you still haven't finished fixing?" And afterwards, my daughter said to me, "That wasn't very smart of them to ask that." And so part of the challenge is you have to understand the whole context. If you're going to jump into the personalization space, you have to be smart enough to understand the differences and the nuances and make sure that the information you're using triggers the actual offer that you're giving or the space that comes forward. The second side of personalization that I think companies fail on is not using that information to actually make a smart offer. And so it is actually a personalization challenge if you are not using the data about a customer to offer added value. So you're missing the opportunity to cross sell, to upsell, and to make
Yeah.
smart decisions. And that's really where digital and artificial intelligence begin to really help you. Because every time a customer opens an email from you or a text message from you, they are making an assessment about your company and whether that company understands you and cares about you based on the content of that message. So if you are sending a message that adds value, you are probably going to add growth and success. If you're sending a message that makes people ask, huh, does Nav get me? You're probably losing some value in some spaces. The last thing that I'd really note is that when it comes to personalization, I think that there's also a uh, key element that people need to consider, and that is the ease of somebody doing business with you. So I
Hmm.
love that when I go back to one of the line retailers that I go to, that it's easy for me to order the same products that I just ordered in things. As a matter of fact, it was my dogs and it's their dog food. And so when I go onto Costco, it's easy for me to reorder the Costco dog food order to be shipped to me. That is helpful. What is not helpful is when organizations change the utility bill structure and reporting, and you are a son or a daughter who's trying to help your elderly parent navigate that same space. Because if the layout and user experience is different for every individual, it makes it really difficult for peers to give assistance and give help in what to do and to move forward. So, personalization has great potential, but you always have to come back to who is the customer, what is their use case, and how do we make sure that this is removing friction for them and creating the right relationship with the organization?
That tells like data maturity is very important here. and understanding of that data, making sense from it, and have your segments and have your journeys in place correctly, specific to the segment of customers, the user audiences.
Yeah, you're an expert in that, and I really appreciate the work that you've been doing and driving this forward. But just to go back to our earlier conversations, this
Yeah.
all comes back to how we build that buy-in across the organization.
Hmm.
So we shouldn't be thinking about our customer experience segments without talking to our sales team and finding out what information they need and what personalization elements they need in order to be successful in sales, and then making sure that we're connecting that to the frontline staff and collecting that frontline staff feedback that helps us build that ecosystem. One of the challenges of bureaucracy is that everybody works in a different department, but the thing that unites them is trying to drive business growth through customer satisfaction. So, how do we view our role as being that glue that helps connect and drive the organization forward?
Your point is okay. That's well architected to how to deliver, how to understand voice of customer, how to understand sentiments while customers are using those applications. But it's a balance. Like, customers are digital, but they also walk in as you walk into the retail stores. I do, and many times we prefer to, especially in restaurants, we 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 tend to look for that person who serves us better than others, and we wait until that person is available, the server is available. What I'm coming to is like, this heroic CX is actually difficult to scale because not all service providers, not all reps, not all sales, not all digital properties are serving same level of experience company wide to all customers at scale. So that consistent brand experience is missing for customers. It depends on the touch point or the digital interaction property or the person customers are dealing with. Customer experience shifts. So there are manual processes also in the back end. Do you see it's a reality in 2026 also that there is a heroic CX killing the business from scalability in the space?
Well, I mean, I would definitely say that a few years ago, uh, it was common to see a list of CX heroes, and it was common to see the question, "What is your CX superpower?" Some of those things are good exercises because it's good for people to know their strengths. But on the flip side of that, it is wrong to think or imply that any one person is responsible for the customer's experience. Every person is going to play a role in that at a point in time. And I think you bring up a good point that sometimes people associate great customer experience with those not only heroic but really almost mythical moments that people have. The restaurant worker who drives hours after the restaurant has closed to deliver a pizza to somebody because they're having a personal crisis, or the store owner that opens a shop early or late, in order to meet someone. Those are not systematic spaces. If it made sense for that shop to be open early or late, it would be open early or late on a regular basis. What CX is about, as you use the right word, scalable. And so what we really have to think about is how we do the two different things. One, create a strong, repeatable experience. That is the core bread and butter of our business. Then the second element is, how do we create a culture that allows individuals to deviate within range off of the end of that core standard? Because it's nice when you have somebody who uses a personal name or makes a personal connection or gives an extra
Mhm.
smile. Or I remember once I was tending bar at a bar mitzvah, And when the kids would come up to order a Shirley Temple, I would give them an extra maraschino cherry for every Shirley Temple that they had. And so when they had 3, they got 3 cherries, and they just all thought that that was incredibly special, and that's okay. But, that is something that you wouldn't want somebody doing if what you were giving away is not a maraschino cherry that probably cost less than a penny, but giving away, a dessert to every one of your, tables. That gets
Uh-huh.
expensive. And so,
Right.
sometimes what appears to be a hero is actually undercutting the business success because it's setting the wrong expectation and it's not
Mm.
a profitable space. So, I think that we need to realize that not only are we not trying to create heroes, we are also not always relying on CX to be the driver of the business outcome. To me, one of the things that comes to mind is the recent tragedies in the sky, where we've had airplanes have significant safety issues. Well, safety is one part of customer experience, but very few people would consider safety to be a customer experience initiative, And so, if you were to ask me what I would prioritize safety over customer experience, so it's just something for us to keep in mind along the way.
That's interesting to hear from you. I mean, you are driving, as I mentioned, North Star for customer experience, and your priority is safety, which is interesting to hear because these passive angles on the business are undermined typically in the race of revenue and scalability in the competition today, especially in 2026 when AI is like boosting up on the technology side in all aspects, safety and sustainability and like uh, uh, culture. I mean, these are all things are not given so much priority right now, which are actually a fuel to the engine as well.
There are a couple of things that run behind the business that are just incredibly implicit in people's expectations. People expect that the information that they receive is going to be accurate. So that's an element of trust. People expect that you're going to provide safe, whether that safe is in terms of the airline security or in terms of the food handling. They are expecting that you're going to have safety, you're going to have fares. People expect that you're going to do what you said you were going to do. I think the sustainability one is another one that fits behind that, and I'm glad that you brought it up because right now in the race to use AI, there are a lot of organizations that are really hammering the data centers. They need so much time and energy in order to generate these AI responses that it is ultimately going to contribute to environmental damage, to increase cost on the customer. And really, if you look at the communities where the data centers are being located, a lot of concern about corporate citizenship. And so I think that this idea of thinking about sustainability is just as true in AI as it was in the time when we were asking, why is this company sending me another piece of mail? Why are they using too much packaging in order to get a product to arrive to me? So I think that with all of this, we need to keep the same sort of guidance that we did before. Be a good steward of resources. And that stewardship of resources is your organizational time, it's your energy use, it's your water use, it's your protection of public health. Everyone has a responsibility to be a good steward.
You have mentioned journey pods to be there to break silos, right? And sustainability, culture, cross team collaboration, safety. If we blend all these together, how can a good customer journey implementation looks like within the company in the meeting room? What is the starting point and what are those key points that you think teams should cover in order to have a good journey plan in place? Okay. And what journey pods really are from your perspective, if you want to explain that a little bit too.
Yeah, I know a lot of the people who are watching this are familiar with the idea of a customer journey, but for those who aren't, the customer journey begins when a customer first learns of an organization, its programs, products, and services. And it continues all the way through all of the steps and interactions that individual has with the organization until they no longer interact with it, either because the company has ended or they no longer have an interaction with that program, product, or service. So they are now a past customer, perhaps. What's interesting about it is that if you think about the organizational model, as Nav pointed out, companies chop that up. And so they have a PR company that helps to set the, or PR department that helps to set the initial learning and perception. You have a marketing department that is responsible for raising awareness of products and bringing people to the sales channel. You have a sales function that is responsible for closing the deal and making the sale. Then you have a customer success area that's responsible for
Yeah.
onboarding and getting set. Then you have your ongoing operations and delivery and your spaces and your renewal and your loyalty program. And even sometimes your attempts to come back and recapture past customers. All of those are handled by different departments, but they're all handled by the same customer. So if you think about it,
Yes.
if in one imagine the frustration you would have if you found out that every department required you to speak a different language, like literally a different language. You start off in English and then all of a sudden it changes to Dutch and then all of a sudden it changes to German and all of a sudden it changes to Japanese. We all know that that would be incredibly frustrating even for the most multilingual of customers. Well, that is what we've been doing. Each department has been speaking its own language, its sales language, its customer success language, and it makes sense internally. So how do we reverse that? To me, the fundamental two things that we need to do: increase our capacity to understand and perceive the customer's side of the equation. So when you look at a website, you look at a marketing material, you look at a product, stop trying to ask, what is the best thing the company can do? And start trying to ask, how are customers going to feel about this? Or how are they going to experience this? Or does this answer the questions that they need? Take that one step further and add into that journey map how they actually will feel and how important that touch point is. Because we can think about some different elements here. Not every interaction that a customer has with a company is equally important. Sometimes when you're going to check out, you do want to talk to somebody who's knowledgeable and can help you understand how to use the product. Other times you're just looking to check out and have that transaction process quickly and accurately. You don't want to interact with somebody in a store or even an online bot. The second side of that equation, when I'm talking about moving from organization and department and department, is really for each department team to start asking, does this work for us as a department? And to start asking, does this work for the customer? Does this work for our employee team? And does this work for the organization's bottom line? The key is to move away from trying to maximize those 3 points of the triangle. So don't try to make something just be a customer solution or just be an employee solution or just be a shareholder solution, and try to get into the middle of that triangle and find a solution that is balanced and works acceptably for all three.
Awesome. And you mentioned personalization, and many organizations think they are personalized because of they have resources in place, but the execution is weak and customers are suffering. All right, so let's talk about a little bit on how can companies realize there are disconnects, how to measure, like, of course, what are those results and metrics that can tell that okay, this is broken?
I'm really glad that you asked that because earlier you mentioned voice of the customer, and we've used a lot of examples that talk about voice of the customer. But voice of the customer is just one channel, an important channel because it allows the customer to often give us feedback in a way that reflects their own perspective rather than the lens that we're asking. But in addition to the voice of the customer, we really have to think about what Ian Golding calls the voice of the process and the voice of the business. And this is the area of us looking at statistics and data that help us to understand how elements are functioning. And this is the space where digital really becomes so super strong, and sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way. And so, for example, who hasn't had an experience where you've gone and done a Google search about a place that you're thinking of visiting or a product you're thinking of buying, and all of a sudden you start getting all of these ads about that space and that area?
Like
Well,
that.
yeah, sometimes that's great because if you're planning a vacation, that can be helpful. Sometimes that's misleading because if I had been researching something on behalf of somebody else, all of a sudden I'm being bombarded with assumptions about myself that are not accurate.
That's
And
right.
so, there's a lot that comes through on that. But it's not just the marketing side. Where are people dropping off of the sales funnel? So where are they abandoning carts? Where are they hitting tension points? Every single one of those drop off areas that you can identify through the data are an investigation point. They are not necessarily an action point, because sometimes it's okay that somebody has investigated something and determined it's not the right fit for them because it's probably not
Mhm.
the right fit for the company either. But looking at those spots are areas that are important. And it's equally important that as an organization, you have a forward looking area and you have a sense, what do we think is going to happen? So for example, if you are a company that sells razor blade handles, you probably have an expectation that that customer is going to buy razor blades from you. If they do not show up to buy razor blades from you, that's an investigation point. And it's an area there for you to look at, and that's not a question just about the customer. It's probably a question about pricing. It's probably a question about delivery channels. It's probably a question about, did the blades you sell actually fit the handle that they needed? you know, did they buy the right handle and the right blades? Maybe they needed a 5 blade razor and they only bought a 1 blade razor. What are the different parts that come into it? But all of this is a level of complexity that really comes back to this word personalization. It is thinking about the market of one and being able to treat it through a data system. It is unlikely that you are going to redesign your razor blade because Nav or I want a slightly different product. But Nav and I together are two. And there are others like us out there. And if there's enough of a segment, maybe it's a time to come back and create a new product or make an adjustment in order to tap into a new market and to grow. So that's how I see all of the data pieces, playing together and getting beyond the voice of customer. Voice of customer is important. Customer research in design and prototyping is important, but really tracking what happens once you've put something out into the market and using that intelligence to help make sure that the perception that customers are having is a positive one and that they continue to come back and do more business with you.
That's interesting. It's a lot of information to digest, but of course, a useful uh, preview of like how to look at that. And through our conversation, what I see is like we have a lot of tactical details that we want to pay attention to. Sometimes those are underrated. And special point is like the customer journey is defined in very different languages, which is actually deal breaker. And we also touched on like why it is important to have consistent brand experience at every touch point through every channel at every time. Okay, so this is important. What are those KPIs that help measure all that picture? Like if you pick top three metrics that you personally prefer to see on your data, and also what leaders should think and look at in 2026. I mean, AI is another thing. uh, it's a turbo booster on the engine you already have, right? If you continue to measure on same metrics during AI time and having different benchmarks, probably a good decision for some, but I think we should look at our metrics. But what are your preferred metrics or your recommended metrics that companies should look at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a really it's a simple question, but it's a really complicated question because every business is different. And so when we're looking at the specific metrics in the specific areas, you have to choose something that is appropriately tailored to your organization. For us, with CXPA as a membership organization, one of the things that we obviously look at is membership retention. And so are people becoming a member, and are they remaining connected to the organization? But there's a lot of nuance that comes with that. Customer experience is a field that most people found along the way by practice rather than by formal academic preparation. And that makes it very easy to get into customer experience. But it also makes it very easy to get out of customer experience because they didn't invest 8 years in a medical degree or 8 years in a law degree, and so they don't feel tied to that professional practice. And
That's true.
so, when we have retention, that goal and those metrics have to be set to the appropriate spot. When you're looking at, metrics, I have a feeling that if I mentioned any one of the metrics that are widely used in customer experience, as the preferred top 3, we would look back at this podcast in 5 or 6 years, and maybe sooner, maybe later, and say, "Well, that was kind of silly to use that metric." Because I think what we're seeing is an advancing technological landscape that is akin to what's happened in medicine. When you and I grew up, you had one metric that was used to determine whether you were sick or not, and that was the temperature on the thermometer. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about the glass mercury thermometer. you you know, Yes, yeah, underneath the tongue, and, thanks for that clarification. Always underneath the tongue. But nowadays, what we recognize is that the information from the thermometer, it was just a metric that tells you whether things are operating normally or not. It doesn't tell you the root cause. It doesn't direct you on what to do. That is a much more sophisticated set of tools and areas. And if you think about it, the same thing has happened on imaging. You went from having x rays to having MRIs to having all sorts of additional scans, that can be done. I think that's what we're seeing in CX. Is that one of the key metrics originally, it has been focused on asking customers to give us feedback on what works. I think when we move forward, we're going to be looking at more direct elements like tracking whether somebody that we expected to come back for a purchase has in fact come back for a purchase. How long is that period between purchases? Much is their investment with the organization? How is it growing? What is our percentage of market share rather than percentage of wallet share? And really thinking about the different pieces that come there. So I think we're going to continue to see that people are going to be looking at operational data to go more directly to the case of how is this growing our business. The metrics that we'll use in terms of customer efficiency and kind of customer satisfaction, in terms of likelihood to recommend, will continue to be tools in the toolkit, but they should be used very precisely with specific use cases. And I'll give you a great one. If you are a small business owner that is just getting started, you absolutely should consider questions like the Net Promoter Score, because it helps you in myriad ways. It helps you justify your market acceptance to the angel investors. It
Mm.
helps you understand who your strongest potential advocates are, and you can leverage that potentially on online reviews and different spaces, or you can even invite those people in to be part of your customer feedback panel. And if you're just getting started, those are fantastic measures in a space to work. And it makes much more sense to do that in those early stages than it does to say, like, who are our top customers? Because the reality is you don't have a large enough sample yet in those early years to build those same
Right.
sort of spaces. When you get
Yes.
to a space like Amazon.com, there's so much data and so much opportunity, it's probably less useful to pursue those strategies than it is to do A/B testing on different digital systems that are up there. So, with that, I kinda wanna turn the tables on you for a moment, Nav, because I talk a lot about the front of the house, and I've talked a lot about the strategy and the space there, but we've talked about how behind this, we have the whole need to have a digital, infrastructure and area. So I talked about the process of looking at the customer and the employee perspective on assessing an organization's readiness to deliver on the customer journey. What can you tell us about assessing an organization's digital readiness to support all of the things that I've been talking about?
Okay. Let me digest the guest persona first. Thank you for asking this question, Greg. Yeah, typically I'm not prepared to answer questions in these recordings. I ask questions, but again, it's an analogy like of our daily lives. Like at any given moment, we sense there is a problem in our health, in our ecosystem around us, anything. Like we start with, oh, where is the problem, what is the problem? So the diagnostic is the starting point for any problem to solve, right? And here is my recommendation to you and to everyone is have your digital maturity assessment in place. Okay, measure your business from five pillars perspective. There are five angles. All businesses run on these five pillars, at least these five pillars. There could be sixth or seventh for some businesses, but these five matter. And these are coming from top notch research institutions: technology, data, customer experience, culture, and leadership. Okay. So these are the five pillars. And there are a lot of surveys out there. Pick anyone you think you trust or you feel good at, measure those five areas on your business and see where it stands. It is like your vision check, your blood pressure check, your cholesterol check of your health, right? So you need to know everything what's going on in your bodies. Similarly, in order to scale, especially in 2026, when AI is a turbo booster on your vehicle you already have. If you have a broken vehicle, AI won't take you far faster. It might break down even more. Okay, because the engine is not ready to take that boost. So in order to be more prepared, have your digital maturity in place. Customer experience is very important because that's the person who is actually giving you money to fuel your engine. Okay, everything else is fancy, look good, fine, perfect, but if customer experience is broken, you can't go anywhere without fuel. So that is the starting point, what I would suggest. And then you have a team already. Once you know the problem, that's the acknowledge it, and that's the starting point. And then start solving it with the best judgment, capability, and process, and the efficiency you already have. And these assessments typically also tell you how to improve. And then how to improve can also give you starting guidance point to see for the help and ask for help if you need, and then just making progress. And that is what my suggestion is, and that is true for all level of businesses. Okay, S- identify your problems, acknowledge it, and start solving it. Big win is just by saving time from mistakes that we are already making. Okay,
Mhm.
that is already 80% victory. If you just reduce number of problems you have in your system, just adding up more technology, add piling up tech stack is not a solution. It is only adding to complexity, right? Simplify your tech stack. I mean, that will that will
Yep.
come from those reports that you will do through your assessment. That is my recommendation, Greg.
I love the fact that I sprang that on you, and you were still prepared to speak from the heart. I can tell that your wisdom and your passion. Uh,
Always.
but I like that analogy. And I think that this is an important one for us to think about. Is that uh, where we have the greatest problems is when we wait for the problem to happen before we begin to think about it and address it. And so
Hmm.
having this annual checkup, I'm not sure whether it's an annual checkup in the case of a digital maturity, but in your own personal health, having an annual checkup to look in those key critical areas,
Yes.
I think is a tremendously smart thing to do. And in looking at those, it's not just about finding if there's something that needs to be fixed. It's also about finding the patterns that are beginning to develop. So can you imagine being at the strategy table when the conversations were happening between uh, uh, book companies on whether they were going to invest in online bookstores or in-person bookstores? It's a tough thing because they all started, well, most of them started from the in-person bookstores. So of course they were invested and tried to protect that market. And so how do we make sure that we're open to recognizing that, as you said, the customers are the fuel for the business? What the customers want and will buy to the future is what we need to consider and make sure that we're accomplishing. Most of the time, the customers will give you a signal, but the signal
Hmm.
is the question about whether they're buying or not. So if you wait until they stop buying, you've missed the opportunity. And so
That's true.
I really like the idea of having a proactive evaluation and then thinking about how does this contribute to our leadership, to our CX, to our operational success in our space, not just looking back and saying, are we prepared to serve the market the way that it is yesterday or today?
Awesome. Great. Great conversation, Greg. I really enjoyed it and it's very useful, especially customer experience. I love this space and thank you for being on the show.
Well, I absolute pleasure to speak with you again now, and I look forward to the next time that we collaborate. Keep up the great work that you're doing on the digital maturity assessment and advancing these conversations because this is the future. We need to recognize that while there was a day and a time that a retail store could grow because of the personality of one particular leader who worked at the counter and welcomed everybody. That is not the future of scalability, particularly in a global economy. So we need this digital work, and I appreciate that you're helping to lead it.
Thank you, Greg. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ed.
And that's a wrap on this episode. We hope you are walking away with at least one battle tested strategy you can apply to your own digital journey today. This show is built for leaders like you who are tired of the fluff and ready for real solutions. If you found value in this discussion today, please subscribe to the channel and leave us a review. It helps us bring more world-class leaders to the table. Also, feel free to share this episode with a colleague who is navigating these same digital trenches. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.